Yeah, yeah,
All right, Cliff. I asked you here today to interview you about, especially about the past year,
yeah.
highs and lows. So what was what has been so far the low point for you of the year of COVID?
Hmm. Um, the low point was for me, I think, was still nearest the beginning. Um, I had just a really, yeah, because of my situation, being a musician, and essentially losing, not only losing all the work that I had within about a week,
Oh wow.
but also losing all kind of hope of work, kind of for the indefinite future too. So I had like a very strong fall and disillusionment right at the beginning. So I was like, the low point for me was, it was like the second week of March, I guess, where I was literally on my way to a gig and I got called to, I got called by the personnel manager of the orchestra. And they told me to turn around and go home. There wasn't going to be any concerts. And then, yeah, then sort of everything sort of fell apart after that. So yeah, it's like from mid March through April, basically. I didn't really have much to do. I was just like very disillusioned with the world and humanity, and I didn't agree with like anything that the government was doing with the pandemic response, uh, and I was like just really depressed, and bored.
Yes.
Yeah, and that put a strain on me and like my marriage and my sort of sense of self and of being a good father and all that stuff. And then I kind of climbed out of it by the like mid late spring and summer. And summer like almost felt kind of normal for a while when things were a lot better.
Mm.
Then there's a second low point, I would say, like December, January, which was sort of pandemic related, but not entirely.
Right.
But no, nothing was quite as bad as actually for most of like the month. I would say most of April. I would like I would make it through the day and get to bed and then like just break down. That
Yeah.
happened for almost a month.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Um, I just felt like I wasn't like crying over the COVID or the deaths or whatever. It's just like the fact that I felt so beaten down and I wasn't like really my best self or even close to my best self, and I felt like I was letting my kids down and letting Gwen down, and just sort of it just felt like a kind of crappy in a way I've never felt before.
Oh wow.
So that took a while. That took a while to get over.
Right.
And then I started to focus um, on a new career, and that really helped a lot.
Mm.
So I had to go through the process of letting go of music as a career
That makes
in
sense.
order to get over that.
Right. Holy shit. And
Well, yeah,
it is holy shit. What was I gonna say? And you just for our viewers, you play I mean as I know, what I'll tell you play violin, although you're a musician
yeah.
overall. Yeah.
I play violin. So at the time, I was on my way to an orchestra gig in Pennsylvania. It was sort of like one of my main gigs, and then I would do some freelancing and some teaching.
Right.
I was not doing like full time freelancing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I kind of I would like maybe half time, I would say, and then my wife Gwen would, she also does. She's also self-employed and does therapy. So we kind of neither of us is like a full-time 9 to 5 like uh,
Right.
workaholic. So we sort
Right.
of have patchwork, and Um,
You're not a lawyer at Pillsbury
no,
Doughnuts or whatever they're called.
but you know what? It's actually funny. Like that actually, I think helped me. If I had been really like in the scene, working hard and like scrambling for gigs and constantly busy, I think it would have been a lot harder for me to accept what happened.
Right.
I know a lot of people who are in that category of like were full-time musicians, and I don't think they've really accepted yet like what's happened to music,
Are they working
especially
at
what's
all?
happened like, huh?
I said, are any of them working at all?
Yeah,
A little
a
bit.
little bit, like
Yeah.
more than they were last year for sure, but there's still, I mean, it's just like there's so far, it's such a huge hole to dig out of.
Mm.
Um, because yeah, I feel like I just sort of saw right away what was going to happen, because like there's going to be immediate effects, and then those might turn off once the pandemic is over, if it's ever, I'm doing the air quotes in case the video isn't recording.
Right.
If it's ever over. But like damage is already will have been done, to the point that there's just going to be such a much smaller, like audiences are going to take a while to build back up again. Anyway, so it's like, I don't know, maybe I'm just overly pessimistic, but I don't even care at this point. It's like there's enough evidence for me that it's going to be bad for a while and going to be really difficult, that I just don't really want to put myself through that. Like being a freelancer in good times is really freaking hard.
Right, for sure.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and the reason I was part-time was like I did kind of burn myself out earlier in my career, doing too much traveling and hustling, and
You're busting your
overburdening myself with students, and
right.
I really burnt myself out. So yeah, I don't know. It's I'd like to talk to more musicians about it, but like some of them that I know have decided to sort of pursue other things, and some are just sort of waiting it out,
Hmm.
getting like whatever scraps of work that they get.
Yeah. I mean, what, I have two questions, which you're not going to be able to answer at the same time. But one is like, how did you make it through that time? And then the second thing, sort of related, but are you ever going to do, I mean, I know you're doing some now. Are you going to do music again, or are you just not? Or would you, if it came back where there were actually audiences and paying gigs and stuff?
Yeah. How did I get through it? Through that dark time in the spring.
Yeah.
I honestly have to even think about it, because it was so miserable, and I think I might have blocked some of it out. I'm trying to remember like what my typical day was like. It was a lot of staying up late, looking at YouTube, and getting up really late. Um, yeah, I mean, I think it was the first thing I had. Okay, so the first thing I had to do, like I said, was it's like one of those whatever the steps of grief, stages of grief. Like I had to go through the yeah, I don't remember them all in order, but like the acceptance part,
Right.
and like, oh my God, music is over, music is doomed, like the government's going to control us all, and they're like really kind of freaking out. And then I had to accept the things that were likely true. Like even if music does come back, I know that it's not going to be worth it for me to try to build it back up to what it was,
Right.
to build my part in it. Um, and like I also like came to the realization, this was another thing that helped. I came to the realization that I loved music, and I always will, but I never really loved it as a profession.
Mm.
I would enjoy parts of it, enjoy moments, and there are groups that I would still want to play with,
Right.
but I didn't really ever feel comfortable with the idea of like the hustle, and like having to put yourself out there, and like having to like play the game and like glad hand certain people, and it's
Right.
there's a lot, there are aspects of it that I really never liked, and I think for a long time beating myself up, saying like why, um why am I not more into this? Why am I not pushing harder? Why am I not auditioning?
Hmm.
So once I got through that and I accepted that, and then I was able to say, okay, well, what can I do? And I knew that, I've been really, really seriously into wildlife and nature and, birding and all that kind of stuff since I was a kid. So I said, look, like try to make a career out of that. And luckily I had a friend who works as an environmental consultant. And so I told him about it and he was able to like start to get me in a little bit with his company. That's also going to be an uphill battle, but I'm like very into it. So that's what got me through, is like accepting what I'd lost and that I really didn't necessarily want it back, and then finding a new thing to focus on. That's basically it. And then shortly thereafter, the pandemic got a lot better.
Right.
By June, it was like it looked like it was going to be sort of over.
Right. You're so weak.
Would I go back to music? Yeah, I don't feel now like I ever want. I'm never going to go back to like taking auditions and applying for like. I don't want to do like 3 weddings a week or whatever.
Right.
Not that I ever did that, but I won't. I don't like aspire to that. But I'm working with a cellist now, just on duets, just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
Might like do a streaming recital.
Right.
But that kind of
upcoming plug.
Yeah, I don't even have a link for it yet, but yeah, I think I'm always going to play. I'm not going to like quit violin.
Right.
It actually makes the music more fun for me now, because there's no pressure of having the music sort of bolster your like career ego.
Right.
It's like you don't have to say like, oh, I'm defined by being a musician, so everything I do has to be like super judged and like super perfect. And
right.
That's like the pitfall of that. So now that my identity is different, my identity is now like wildlife, environmental consultant, whatever, biologist, and music is a hobby. I think it's going to be a lot easier for me.
Right on.
That's more or less my 2 answers.
No, that's good. You wove them together.
Yeah. Yeah, they're directly dependent on each other.
Yeah.
Those 2 concepts, and then I mean, it's worth mentioning too that like in general, what I've found is that while music has been totally just demolished, environmental work and wildlife stuff, and it's pretty much business as usual. I mean, the traveling for things that require traveling is a little more complicated, but that work still exists, and there's still plenty of like the consulting work is a lot of it's like contracts with oil and gas and various government agencies and things that are still running consistently. So
right.
It's not really. It's kind of pandemic proof.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah, I don't know, and I mean, I just have always been curious, like how anybody makes it work with like with the music career because of the
Yeah.
So that's not a question, but I guess just like how they do it. Like, I know there's the Broadway people who just like play the same show like for years, and that must drive them nuts. Like I don't know how.
Yeah, it's weird. It's the Broadway is sort of its own thing. It's sort of like a it's almost like a closed ecosystem. I've never like tried to crack into it, but like I know a lot of people who play on Broadway. I don't think that there's, maybe with a very few exceptions, I don't think there are ever auditions. There's no like open call. It's like you just have to know people, and so their whole system favors people who know how to talk to people, who know how to like grease palms and compliment. And it's a game of politics more than talent. So and it's not like, not to say that there are no talented players in Broadway, because there definitely are. It's just like, it's slightly different than it would be in an orchestral scene, where you really like, it's very democratic generally, and you're doing blind auditions, and you get your chair based on merit.
Mm.
And it's really not like that in Broadway. Like, the people who do really well, they just like, they know how to schmooze and play the game.
Right. That makes sense.
So, like, so I've heard stories like some shows, they'll have these people who've been there for like the whole run, like whatever, 5, 10, 15 years, and like really are terrible players.
Oh wow.
You just have to kind of live with it, because they outrank you because they know the conductor and they're like in the scene.
Oh wow. Oh,
So that's one part of why I never tried for that. And then the other part is just, like you said, you're doing 8 shows a week of the same shit over and over again.
yeah.
I would go insane.
Yeah.
It's good money though, but yeah, freelancing is hard in any case.
Right.
And then yeah. Well, it's like, think about this too. If you get in on a show, you really have no idea how long you're going to be working. Like, they could fold in a month, or if you're on Phantom or something, you could like have a whole career.
Right.
So, and then like, there's no guarantee that you'll get hired for another. You have to sort of work it all over again to get a new show. And then with other stuff, it's like real feast or famine.
Right.
Entire month. Like, generally, I think February is like a really super dead month for freelancers.
Oh, I would imagine. Right.
The whole holiday, like November to January, is like, the people who make like 3/4 of their income in those 3 months.
Yeah, I would bet. Holy shit.
Yeah. So it's that's like, and then the New York scene is kind of, it's a little different from elsewhere, but I think it's kind of the same idea. God, it was just a slog, it's demoralizing too when you get called for gigs and you realize like how vastly underpaid you're being, but you still accept it, and like, you see other great players accepting it.
Oh shit.
It just feels like it's kind of like a subjugation.
Right.
It's like a real, it's, people who've got like fucking doctorates at, sorry, am I allowed to curse in this? You can
yeah. This is just my fucking website. It's like whatever the fuck happens.
Doctorate from like, like, who went to like 3 different big time conservatories.
Oh wow.
And, it's hugely expensive schools, and they're like playing friggin' like,
what's the worst
like
you ever got paid?
game?
If you don't mind, I'm sorry, I cut you off. But
sure. Apart from zero, I've gotten paid zero before.
Apart from zero, yeah.
The worst, well, I can tell you a couple of paid stories. So, worst I ever got paid. Yeah, I did. The one that felt like the most of a ripoff was a wedding I did down on the shore. So I'm like North Jersey. This gig was like a solid hour and 45 minutes away, except it was summer. So with beach traffic, it made me super late. The gig, I think it paid like $60.
Oh.
And it was this guy, like this contractor that I used to do some work for, and everything that he would send me was like just so desperately low. And he would find these people, like, well, a lot of them were just sort of almost retired or semi-retired, or, so, and I drove all the way down there, and I was late, and I had to like run up the stairs to the, whatever you call it, where the organ is above the church. What do you call that?
Balcony?
The choir loft?
The choir loft, maybe, or balcony. Yeah.
And I got like scowls for that. And then I played the gig, and it was like, it wasn't horrible music, but it just kind of demoralizing. So that whole, like, so for that $60, I spent like 2.5 hours driving down, like over an hour at the gig, and then like another 2.5 driving back. So like at least 6 hours of, so it's like what, like $10 an hour minus gas.
Right.
So I'm getting essentially minimum wage for like, this is the shit that I paid, I went to university, for crying out loud.
Right.
It's weird. It's when I know people who like, so in Harrisburg, there are people who will sub for like big, Boston and New York Phil and Baltimore.
Mm.
So like one week they might be making like a lot of money subbing for New York Phil, and then the next they're like at Harrisburg like making, not garbage but a lot less, and then another night they might be playing some crappy wedding for like $70.
Right. Oh, wow.
It's weird. It's like, how do you, like, you never in like any other skilled career you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't be like a doctor. Like, I don't know, maybe they would. Like if you set out to have like a sliding scale, I guess you could do that, but like you wouldn't be like I don't know, like a carpenter and say, I'll build this house for like whatever, 100,000, and I'll build this other one for like 5. But
We could have a choice.
yeah,
I mean, it sounds like you don't, if you're trying to build a musical career, like it sounds like you don't have a choice, that even people who are
yeah,
really established have to take shit money gigs.
basically. Well, the way it's like, it's kind of, it's a weird thing because it is true that if you're a certain level of talented, you don't have to deal with this kind of crap. Or it always was true. Like if you're absolutely elite musician,
Right.
like someone's gonna discover you, like you'll end up with an agent and you'll be doing, but even then, like, especially for classical, they're not like buying yachts and stuff. They're
Right.
a very solid upper middle class living.
Mhm.
Maybe if you like get really lucky, you can be like a,
Like a
it's
Yo-Yo
Coleman
Ma
or
or
John
something.
Bell or something. Yeah, or Long or whatever. But those guys are probably living pretty well.
Yeah.
But for everyone else, it's like, and again, it's like incredibly, incredibly talented people who are just either slightly less talented or slightly less um, uh, sellable as an act.
Mm.
There's really no. It's all subjective anyway. So there's a ton of people who are just really, really amazing musicians who work like this like ridiculous sort of scale from pretty good money to garbage money,
Mm.
and you can't like, it's really hard to say I'm only going to play this certain type of gig and end up having a career,
Right.
because, and that's kind of where I ended up. Was I just decided I only really want to play in this symphony and like maybe a couple others, and I'm going to only teach at this school. I just sort of filtered things out that really I didn't like and weren't working for me.
Right.
um and then it wasn't that much, and luckily I didn't have a problem with the amount of work, like the amount of money or amount of work, but it's like I wouldn't, I had trouble really calling it even a career at that point.
Mm.
But I hated that hustle. I hated that feeling of doing all this work. For it's like, I'll tell you another quick story. I had a I got called to play a musical at a college, so like sort of as a ringer for their pit orchestra.
Mhm.
And
Right.
the contractor said like, oh, I think I came in the first day and I read through with them. He's like, oh, you're really great. And like, well, we're just gonna pay, like, I said, what's the pay? And he said, well, you know what? Why don't you just figure it out and tell me what's fair and like write me an email. And and I said, okay, if you're sure that's all right. He said, yeah, don't worry about it.
Mm.
And then what happened was like we had a couple of rehearsals that went super long, like 6-7 hour rehearsals.
Oh, Jesus.
Just like they didn't do a good job of like separating the tech rehearsal from the dress from the, like, so they sort of
Oh,
did everything in a mishmash and it was very sloppy and they had to do things over and over again. And like meanwhile, I was like mentally billing. I just billed myself like an average, I think like 50 an hour,
mhm.
which is like pretty reasonable. If you're doing one show, it's a little over $100, for that sort of scale of,
Right.
and then, like, so we did a couple rehearsals and a couple of performances, and I sent the guy a bill, and it was like fairly sizable, but it was like the work that I had done,
Right.
right? I had earned it, but I just, in his mind, I guess, imagine I was going to hit him with like a number that was like a third of that amount or less.
Wow. Yeah.
It's like, wow, that's such a lot. And I just remember saying, like, you were the one, like, you had me as a ringer. You said, like, we couldn't like make this work without your sound. And then you're telling me I'm not worth, like, why would you let me set my price?
Right.
I think he did end up giving it to me, but he
Oh,
was,
wow.
but that's the kind of thing, and this guy is a musician too, which is even worse.
Right.
It's very easy the reason that can ever happen is because musicians tend to be kind of easily cowed
Right.
and like shamed, and they're stereotypically like not very good with money and
Right.
math, and like, and they have a lot of self-doubt about their self-worth and their musical worth, so
Right.
it's easy to pull that kind of crap on
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's just like, right. And I mean, that's just the classic thing. Like musicians don't know how to do business and whatever, whatever.
yeah. I don't think that's true anymore. Like the younger people, I think, are pretty, people have started to sort of do everything for themselves, right? Like they're releasing their own records and they're
Right.
putting on their own tours. So yeah, it's different now.
Yeah.
uh yeah. And then I've gotten paid zero too. Usually if I get paid zero, they tell me I'm getting paid zero.
Right.
But I've heard stories of people getting stiffed before, and that also happens.
Ooh.
Yep. Man, it's funny to talk about this. It seems like it all seems like such a distant past, and it was
Right.
only a year
It's just
ago.
a year ago.
Yeah.
That's so crazy. That doesn't sound, yeah. So like, so you lost that or let go of that.
Let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like the worst thing to have let go.
No, because it was actually, I think it was kind of harming me,
Right.
because it never felt like enough. The stuff that I was doing never felt like enough, and never felt substantial enough for me to make it my identity,
Hmm.
for me to be comfortable in my identity as a like a rubber stamped musician.
Right. Totally.
Because like the mentality is like you have to be hustling all the time, you have to be, and this is the thing that happens when musicians get like, you run into musicians you haven't seen in a while, or like you meet new musicians, and it's always this kind of shop talk where it's like, oh, where else do you play? That's
Hmm.
a typical question. You meet at a gig
Yeah.
and they'll say, where else do you play? And it's like partly sort of flexing, and it's also partly like they want to know if you play at a place and you can put in a good word for them.
Right.
Like this constant networking and kind of bullshit, like, can I say dick measuring? There's a
Yeah.
lot of like that kind of shit.
Can I say dick measuring?
There's a lot of, yeah, there's a whole lot of dick measuring, a
Yeah.
lot. And all that that I hate, I just hate that conversation. Like, what do you do? Oh, oh, Mr. Brewer. Oh, so what do you do? Like, I hate that stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's
It's like,
meaningless.
so it's
Why do
kind of,
you
yeah, it's pretty meaningless.
I mean, I have my own
Was
reasons.
that?
Why do you hate it? That dick measuring career stuff.
Why do I hate that? Well, the dick measuring career stuff. Well, with music in particular, it's like you're playing with someone at a gig. Like, if you want, like, you could play for them or they could listen to you.
Right.
But the more important thing ends up being like, well, where else do you play? Like, what else do you do?
Right.
Because it's like we're being held to this standard, both, I think, internally and externally. Are being sort of conditioned to this standard that, like, in order for, like, it's like the mentality is, because you don't have a steady job, right? If you're a real freelancer,
Right.
you don't have a steady thing. So you have to like build this bulk of enough little things that you can like make it be like a full-time job, and like have that kind of self-esteem that you have as like a salaried employee.
Right.
And I think that's hard for people to really like, it's hard for people to do.
Hmm.
And it's hard for people to have that kind of the self-esteem that you would have it's not even self-esteem, it's like the identity. It's like if you work for Google, you're like, oh, I work at Google, and that's all you have to say. Everyone knows exactly, you're like, they know you're making good money, you know,
Right.
all the things that go with having like a, yeah, like a real
Good job.
career. And like, and then it's also the sort of stigma that like no one who isn't a musician really thinks that musicians are worth a shit.
Right.
You know, they go, oh, it's so cool. They're like, oh, it's so cool that you get to like dick around and play music
Right.
instead of
Totally.
sitting in an office all. Like they never, no one really takes it seriously. So
Right.
then it's like sort of like that immigrant mentality. Like you have to work twice as hard to prove to everyone that you can. It's just like it's so shitty.
It is.
And like just in general, the dick measuring career thing. It's like what a stupid metric to like.
What a stupid metric.
Stupid metric what a stupid metric to use for like how well you're going to relate to someone, especially like meeting someone new.
Right.
I've thought about that a lot. Like, what's a good substitute? Like, if I were going to write a like a self-help book, like another thing to say at a party instead of "So what do you do?"
Right.
I mean, I say it. I find myself saying it because I'm like, if I get stuck and I don't know what to say to someone,
Right. Yeah, it's like an easy card to grab.
it's just easy. Yeah, I think that's probably why people do it. But like, if you really want to know someone, there's so many better things to ask, I think.
Right. Oh, for sure. Like, what do you think? I mean, this is a thought I had like about that, and it does relate to this Corona time too. Like, just the masculinity question, the masculinity angle. Like, how
Yeah,
does that?
yeah, that was
I mean, for you, like, how did that? It sounds like it did. Like, for you, how did that affect your like your own sense of your dick measure? If I
yeah.
could use that term, because it really is. I mean, for me, just
Yeah,
to say, not to like put it all. For me, it is. You know, it's a real thing. Like that sense of like, oh, maybe it's shrunken or whatever.
yeah. Well, I always felt kind of that way because even in the times when I was really hustling and doing a lot of work, I still wasn't making very much. I was living with my parents, like kind of aspiring to move out and like think, well, how many more bullshit jobs could I get before I could afford to move out? That kind of stuff. And it was that aspect sucked.
Hmm.
It really sucked. It's you know, you can work so hard and get nowhere and make
Right.
nothing.
Hmm.
It just makes you feel like, why did I do why did I do any of this? Um, and I know people are. It's the other thing. Again, people won't believe me when I say it's really not like that aspect of it is not necessarily about talent. Sometimes it is.
Right.
Like there are definitely people who beat their head against a wall and they show up to gigs and everyone's like, well, who the fuck is this? Like, why? you know. But eventually, those people wash out. Like you just won't get invited back to stuff.
Right.
But it's super common for people to just get caught in this vortex, like really, really good players, and they just get ground down because they just, for whatever reason, they get stuck in a bad cycle of gigs, or or they don't care enough to, like, oh, I'm happy playing this, playing for $50.
Right.
It's really weird. I was shocked to find out that like jazz musicians in New York City, like the rate they play gigs, I wouldn't even send my students to play.
Right. Well, jazz.
Like two sets in a restaurant for like $60 and a beer.
Yeah.
Like it's like what it boggles my mind.
Yeah.
Like you're literally better off sweeping the streets.
Right. Oh yeah. For money,
Uh,
yeah, for sure.
yeah. Or for that matter, busking in the subway.
Right.
Probably make more money than doing jazz clubs. It's nuts.
For sure. Yeah, jazz is terrible. I mean,
All
yeah,
this.
yeah.
So this is all like the pre-COVID thing, right?
Right.
And then so now you take, you know, everything that's happened, and you compound that on top of. Hold that thought 1 second.
Yep.
What do you want? I'm busy. I'm busy. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Yeah. So that's yeah. I was really ready to be done.
Right.
to be done with that. Oh, I was talking about the dick measuring. Yeah. So I always hated that because I can't, like, what can I do? There's no way I can convey to someone
Or just
with,
a second.
sure.
I'm gonna pause it. Okay.
Oh,
Back.
there's no, we're back. There was never any way that I could make someone really understand, someone who has like a, who works at like Google or Verizon or whatever
Right.
with salary. How could I convey like what I do by describing a couple of the orchestras that I sometimes play with, and like
Right.
that it just doesn't, like, it's two different languages.
It's different worlds, right? Yeah.
It's a different world. Yeah. So it's really like musicians talking to non-musicians, that's always the issue. It's like no one really takes it seriously. They don't even know that music is actually a career unless you're like Britney Spears or Michael
Right.
Jackson.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's just a fundamental lack of mutual respect. And then musicians talking to musicians, it's all about just like, how am I gonna like get a connection, and like, oh,
Right.
recommend me, and
Yeah. Work
like,
with.
ooh, I can tell that I've made it because I play like in a better orchestra than you. It's like, it's so stupid.
Yeah.
Um,
Dog.
oh, the other question you'll hear a lot is, I'll have a conversation with someone like, oh, where do you live? Like another musician. Uh, where do you live? Oh, I'm in New Jersey. Oh, whereabouts? I'm like, I don't know, like 40 minutes from the city. And like, oh, so do you gig in New York City a lot?
Right. All
Like,
right.
yeah, I don't like why. I mean, I kind of, yeah, I get it.
Right.
Like, again, it's just more dick measuring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Total dick measuring.
Um,
It's just like, I don't know. I always, to me, it's a fascinating question. This whole like, and it seems very United States to me. Like you say, what do you do?
yeah.
Find out who someone is. What do you do? Oh, like, and then you place them, and they're on a little like spot in your brain. This person's a
Right.
lawyer, and this person's a garbage collector, and this person's whatever. And but to me, it's a bummer. And the question I've had a lot, and like I wonder what you'll think of this, but the question I've had a lot is like how to, especially, I do think there's a kind of a crisis of masculinity nowadays, right? I really do.
Yeah.
Like how do you fit? Like how do you feel like manly in that world that's like that? Because I can see even the Google employee is going to feel like I'm less of a man because I'm just a computer nerd or whatever, and so they have to get like buffed up to like,
Yeah.
you know,
I guess so. There's masculinity in the salary for sure.
right?
Because I think they make pretty good money. I don't know precisely, but there's
Hundred.
at least some people making a ton of money at Google. Yeah, there's some masculinity in that, and in the fact of having a 9 to 5.
Right.
Yeah, well, it's weird about masculinity because classical music is fundamentally um, unmasculine in a lot of ways.
Right.
So, like, within the world, it's not really too big of an issue. But you like, I would notice it talking to non-musicians. That feeling of like, well, he's going to ask me what I do, and I'm going to explain it, and he's going to be thinking that I'm like, what kind of a man am I? Like,
Right.
what am I doing? Like a kid,
Right.
So like fiddling around, and
Yeah.
and only working like two hours at a time.
Right. Like they think you're taking baths all day long and then just like getting up.
Yeah, I mean, even if we were, it's like that's the training. That's the freaking job. That's what we
Right.
trained for. We didn't train to sit at a desk and play violin for 9 hours.
Right.
We trained to like, we're sprinters. That's
Right.
And I've actually played gigs where I am playing for 8 hours, and it's absolute brutality.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not even the fit, like the physical aspect is bad, but the mental aspect of being that on for that long is pretty brutal.
Oh yeah.
Um,
It's super focused. Yeah.
um, what was I going to say? Masculinity. Yeah, I think my suspicion, my thought about that is that that's already getting better and probably will continue to get better. Because I think, well, look at what's happened. Like the gig economy, like that used to be like music, right? It was like musicians and maybe a few other people. Now it's like it's this whole thing where people are sort of piecing stuff together and like, I mean, that's the stuff that we've done forever.
Right.
So that's going to become more acceptable. Not having either not having a career identity at all, or not having like a solid 9 to 5, like,
right,
career path. So that gives me some hope. Although right now, like the music gig economy is pretty terrible.
Oh yeah, it's in the tank. Yeah.
But yeah, music is one of those things. It's classical anyway, where it's really, I'm sure people would fight me on this, but I think overall it's relatively democratic and egalitarian. There's a ton of, it's probably even more, I would say more, depends on your instrument, more women than men, but a fairly good balance. Like no one's really complaining about it. I mean, not really complaining about it. Yeah. There are definitely noticeable issues with race, which I think are just a function of, it's just like, that music hasn't really bled over. I mean, they're working on it. They're working on like introducing that more to a wider variety of people, but it's just like the fact of it is, it was always sort of insulated in these sort of middle class, white, basically.
Yeah.
And the audience is all like old white people, so that plays in too.
Yeah.
But it's definitely gotten better. I think there are very few. I've totally derailed this. This is now becoming like the whole like race and class thing. But I think there are very few instances of like credible active discrimination, at least in the States, because of the way that orchestras are set up, especially.
Right.
Probably a lot more. And again, I don't really know because I'm just a white guy.
Yeah.
But I think if that's happening, it's probably more on the fringes.
Right.
Maybe something like Broadway, where it really is like a boys club, an old boys club. I mean, there's women who play too, but
right.
I'm kind of rambling a bit. But my point was going to be that it's sort of egalitarian in a way that you wouldn't have like a man and a woman of roughly the same age playing the same instrument, same talent level. They should really have basically the same career if they're awake and like going out and like finding things.
Right.
So, my orchestra, like, I think in my section, my violin section was like usually mostly women, and like maybe 60-70%. It depends on the instrument too. Like brass, generally more male.
Yeah.
That's
totally the double, like the bass, it's like
right. There's definitely like expressions of gender difference across an orchestra, but overall it's like we all kind of get the same life.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I probably have a lot more thoughts on that, but I don't know.
No, it's fine. It's
yeah.
I'm doing like the dead airspace style interview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I short shrifted that. It's like partly I don't really want to get into the race thing necessarily, but I definitely short shrifted that. It's a lot more complicated than I made it sound.
No, I'm sure.
Any of your viewers were gonna like, well, you didn't.
Yeah. You'll get like
it's a whole lot more complicated, and it's like it's impossible to go to a classical music concert and see like the one black guy on stage and not think like, what the fuck's going on here? Like
Right.
there's definitely something going on, but it's like, it's not that they're like, oh, we can't let any, you know, non-white people into this orchestra. It's like,
Right.
it's deeper than that.
Yeah, it's people. No, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a cultural thing. Like, I mean, I grew up. I started hearing classical
Yeah.
young and stuff, and it's a white thing. And those are the
Right.
composers are European guys and whatever.
Yeah.
The older
Right.
ones,
Asian too. Like
right? Sure.
it's in the past, whatever,
The newer guys.
50, 60 years, like classical has become a thing in Asia, and like they really have, they've embraced it, and like they're really, really good symphonies all across Asia, and a lot of musicians coming here too from Asia, but
Right.
yeah, but it really doesn't have any place in like mainstream like Hispanic or Black culture, really.
No, no,
Not meaningfully.
right.
Um,
Not at all.
but it's like, and like the first thing I would say to that is like, first of all, Latinos and African Americans have so much other, like, honestly, kind of more interesting music of their own.
Right.
It's like, it's not like there's a finite amount of music that you can have in your sphere, but it does like shit gets crowded out when there's other stuff that's like more important and more relevant. And
Right.
so here's like another thing that happened to me because of this pandemic is like sort of a disillusionment about classical and music in general,
Right.
which was already happening. I mean, COVID is it's like one nail in the coffin, honestly, because classical has been tanking for decades. I mean, it's all subsidized by government money when they can get it, and like rich donors and corporations when they can't. And it's the audience has gotten older and smaller, and the things that they've tried to do to like branch out and like reach younger or more diverse audiences have just been kind of half-assed, to be perfectly honest. Like half-assed and or not enough.
Right.
And it just like there were points in the past, like even past 5-10 years, when I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? Just sitting on a stage and like playing the same Mozart symphony again that we played 2 years ago.
Right.
Seeing these old people literally falling asleep.
Yes.
They paid $50-$60 to sit in a chair and fall asleep in front of a bunch of musicians.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Like, really, like, what is this?
Right.
Why is this? Why does this exist? It's really weird. And you don't realize how much you get like energy and vitality and like happiness from the audience, like from the spirit of like the people listening to you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Until you play like really like gigs that are really like relevant and important, and you say, oh my God, like these people are going nuts. It's like
right.
awesome.
Yeah.
It doesn't even matter really what you're playing. It's just like, it's so awesome to have that. So, are we getting the signal?
I'm getting the signal. I got to pick up Solly pretty soon.
Oh, okay.
I don't have to go this second, but
this is cool.
It is cool. I was going to ask you, we are running out of time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all fascinating to me, that whole world. And like I wasn't in the classical part of it except in college, but I wasn't professional or whatever. And
yeah,
that stuff's fascinating to me. And then I'll just say one thing, which is like playing rock was like, instead of playing for old people falling asleep, it's playing for people who are getting drunk.
Getting drunk, yeah.
And that's really all. And it was kind of a bummer to be like, why the fuck am I doing this? It's just so this guy can get drunk on a Tuesday in some weird bar in San Francisco. Like these poor people can get drunk while we play. It's like, what's the point?
I prefer that. To me, that's serving a function. I mean, it does suck, but it sucks to me less than playing for a falling asleep old person.
Oh,
Because it's serving a specific function in the way that like if you play at a wedding, like you're also kind of being ignored, but like you're necessary to the event.
yeah, that's still kind of cool.
Like
Right,
yeah, it was like a scene. Like you want that music going, so you to have the drink. It's like
right.
going to someone's party where it's like there's no music and no one's talking. It's like terrible.
Yeah. It's,
So yeah, that's what I would say. It's like it just as long as you're serving an actual function. And I felt like with sometimes, not all the time, but a lot of times in those classical concerts, like really the only thing those people are there for is to say that they went out.
hmm,
That's it. Just I just wanted to be able to say I got the fuck out of the house.
right,
And maybe I wanted someplace warm to sit after dinner,
right.
after from my night out.
Yeah.
They
Oh,
don't really care about the content. They don't care about the quality even. They don't. It's
right.
just like a kind of a like a weird quaint status symbol.
Hmm, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Shit on the shingle. Well, it's yeah. I just as we're sort of wrapping up, like it's just fascinating to me, like the sort of the whole like journey, like that caused by the COVID thing. You know, the whole awareness and letting go of something that
Yeah.
maybe would have happened. Maybe it probably would have eventually, but was for sort of for you seems like more forced to happen because of
Yeah.
circumstances.
It really made sense. It was something that was sort of slowly happening to me, and then it made it a lot easier for it to happen
Right.
when the COVID thing happened. And I don't know exactly how it's going to play out with other musicians and with like the organizations that they belong to. But it's like I just don't really see how it's possible that it doesn't happen at some
Right.
point. Like
Yeah.
just this gradual sort of crumbling.
Yeah.
And I'll just really quick, like I've talked to a couple other musicians who kind of like the sort of consensus we have, the sort of half-assed consensus is that there's going to be like the sort of big like linchpin, New York Philharmonic and, you know, uh, San Francisco, maybe in LA and Houston and Boston, Chicago, like whatever handful of 10 or 12 that are just going to be like museums essentially. They'll be propped up by donations and government money.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Most like this the sort of smaller like Harrisburg and Toledo and like whatever these other smaller things they're just gonna sort of disappear.
Right. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
consolidating. It's gonna be a much narrower sphere.
Right.
It's gonna to me it's gonna be more like maybe like the NBA,
Right.
like professional sports league. We've got like sort of these elite things, and then that's basically it. Like you can
Right.
play basketball for fun, or you can make millions of dollars.
Right.
There's
Right.
not really a
Exactly.
lot of middle ground.
Yeah.
I
There's
think
nothing.
that's what it's going to be, something like that.
Yeah. What a
I
crazy.
don't know. There's a lot of people. I don't think they're in a headspace to be able to accept that as even a possibility.
Yeah. But that makes total sense. I mean, I think that it's just
Honestly, maybe that's what it should be.
right.
Like maybe that's just it. Like yeah, it's ancient fucking music. Like it
Right.
has no relevance to us.
Right.
It's just a museum.
Yeah.
It's a musical museum, which that's great. Like you don't need 1,000 Mona Lisas.
No.
You just have the one.
Right. Or you don't need 1,000.
You don't need 1,000 Met museums even.
Exactly. I was gonna say too. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
got the Met, and you got like some shit hanging in your library.
Then you have those places in like Italy, the
Yeah.
and whatever. Yeah. But you don't need museums like in every, and like you don't need museums in like Springfield, Mass, or whatever.
No,
Not really.
not yeah.
Anyway, how much time do I have left? Oh my god, I got what's so quickly. What is the now you have like 2 seconds to do this. What's been the high point of the whole last ball sacky year?
The high point for me was going to Ecuador.
That's what I figured.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was 100% escape. I was like away from everything. I didn't miss anything at all.
Mm.
It's like completely in my element. I was living the dream of being a scientist.
Right.
Like completely immersed, like a completely immersive, 100% realistic virtual reality.
Right.
Not just living it Yeah, it was awesome. And then like coming back from that was one of the roughest experiences ever because it was a complete plummet into reality. It was awful.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was the summer was cool too. There was a period in the summer where we sort of we went up to our family's lake house in New Hampshire,
Right.
and we just like invited people, and we just like not we didn't wear masks or anything. We just like acted. I just kind of forgot actually that there was even a thing happening.
Right. And no one got sick.
Like us on a lake, you know, it wasn't like we were at risk of anything, but
Right.
it was nice to.
Yeah, you guys didn't start a big COVID outbreak or anything.
There was no COVID outbreak. No, I think at that point, New Hampshire hardly had any cases anyway.
Right, that's true. They did. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, I should go.
Yeah, we could do a part 2 if you want.
Yeah, I'd love to. Let me
Like,
stop recording. Ready?
yeah.
Stop recording.